convention tonight, a convention that brings together, in the spirit of unity, a son of immigrants and a descendant of slaves. Fannie Lou was a prophet of freedom. Our speaker tonight can be aptly called a voice of the future, an eloquent voice who expresses the basic beliefs of our party and of our democracy. Her name is Ann Richards. She grew up in a poor family. Her parents said that she could be anything that she wanted to be, and she has proven them right. She can command a crowd. She doesn't mince words. She tells it just like it is. Her message transcends race and gender. Her message reaches out to our elderly, to our family farmers, and to our children. And even as she has climbed up the ladder of elective office, she has never looked down on the people that she serves. She is a unifier and a healer. But she's also a tough money manager. As treasurer of the state of Texas, she has balanced the books in the face of some tough times. And if you ask the folks from Texas, they'll tell you she has been tested. I predict that the name of this new woman of the South, this woman of Texas, will be added to the list of freedom-seeking, authentic heroes. Men and women with no time for narrow thinking, no time for self-pity, no time for cowardice, having time only for courage, for charity, and for change. Wondering only about the future and how to bring everybody along together toward our new vision. Change is here, Fannie Lou, because it is a new Mississippi. It is a new South, Fannie Lou, where everyone shares hopes about our children and about our country. Fannie Lou often said in speeches back home, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired." Well, Ann, Democrats all across this country are sick and tired of being sick and tired of a Republican Party that has written off the South. We're sick and tired of being sick and tired of a Republican Party with no vision of the common good. And so, Ann, after hearing you, and after this great Democratic convention, we will be energized and unified and strong and ready to work together to regain the White House in November. Tonight America is lucky. We're going to hear a new voice. We're going to get to know a rare and very special new political leader. America, meet Ann Richards.
Well, we've all seen the picture. The deep blue of the Texas night sky, a hint of starlight, and the orange glow of the campfire, and around it are the manly forms of the good old boys, doing what real he-men do, drinking beer and staring at nothing in particular.
She wasn't born funny, but she got funny pretty quick. That was so she could keep up with her daddy, the funniest pharmaceutical salesman in Lakeview, Texas, a great kidder. They were poor, but then most people were in Lakeview, so nobody really noticed. And the world of the 30s came in on the radio.
Pretty good, Johnny, but that ain't the way I heard it. Has a rendezvous with destiny.
The one thing her daddy never kidded about was his daughter's future. He told her she could be anything she wanted to be, and she never forgot it. When she was ready for high school, the family moved the 10 miles to Waco. Her determined mama wanted Ann to have a big city education. At Waco High, she turned out to be a first-class debater and found that she loved being center stage. And then on to Baylor on a scholarship, where she met a local political firebrand, Dave Richards. On their honeymoon, they put up campaign posters for Henry B. Gonzalez and a whole slew of Democrats. 25 years, 4 kids, and a bunch of canoe trips later, there was this opening on the Travis County Commission, and Ann got elected. She got the commission to serving people instead of just fixing bridges. And next, Treasurer of the state of Texas.
I, Ann Richards, do solemnly swear.
Ann took over an office that hadn't changed much since the days of the Alamo, and she changed it. She brought the place up to date, got the money managed right, and inside 4 years, the Treasury had earned $1 billion in interest. Her strength as a manager is part of her warmth as a person. And when you meet Ann Richards, you know you've connected with somebody. So one of these days, Ann Richards will say confidently to her granddaughter what her daddy said long ago to her: you can be anything you want to be. Ladies and gentlemen, Ann agreed to come here tonight to deliver the keynote address. And since her word is as good as her bond, here she is, Ann Richards.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Buenas noches, mis amigos. I'm delighted to be here with you this evening because after listening to George Bush all these years, I figured you needed to know what a real Texas accent sounds like. Years ago, Barbara Jordan, another Texas woman, Barbara made the keynote address to this convention, and 2 women in 160 years is about par for the course. But if you give us a chance, we can perform. After all, Ginger Rogers did everything that Fred Astaire did. She just did it backwards and in high heels. I want to announce to this nation that in a little more than 100 days, the Reagan, Meese, Deaver, Knopfziger, Poindexter, North, Weinberger, Watt, Gorsuch, Lavelle, Stockman, Haig, Bork, Noriega, George Bush will be over. You know, tonight I feel a little like I did when I played basketball in the 8th grade. I thought I looked real cute in my uniform. And then I heard a boy yell from the bleachers, "Make that basket, bird legs." And my greatest fear is that same guy is somewhere out there in the audience tonight. And he's going to cut me down to size. Because where I grew up, there really wasn't much tolerance for self-importance, people who put on airs. I was born during the Depression in a little community just outside Waco, and I grew up listening to Franklin Roosevelt on the radio. Well, it was back then that I came to understand the small truths and the hardships that bind neighbors together. Those were real people with real problems, and they had real dreams about getting out of the Depression. I can remember summer nights when we'd put down what we called a Baptist pallet, and we listened to the grown-ups talk. I can still hear the sound of the dominoes clicking on the marble slab my daddy had found for a tabletop. I can still hear the laughter of the men telling jokes you weren't supposed to hear, talking about how big that old buck deer was, laughing about Mama putting Clorox in the well when the frog fell in. They talked about war and Washington and what this country needed. They talked straight talk, and it came from people who were living their lives as best they could. And that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to tell how the cow ate the cabbage. I got a letter last week from a young mother in Lorena, Texas, and I want to read part of it to you. She writes, "Our worries go from payday to payday, just like millions of others. And we have two fairly decent incomes, but I worry how I'm going to pay the rising car insurance and food. I pray my kids don't have a growth spurt from August to December so I don't have to buy new jeans. We buy clothes at the budget stores and we have them fray and fade and stretch in the first wash. We ponder and try to figure out how we're going to pay for college and braces and tennis shoes. We don't take vacations and we don't go out to eat. Please don't think me ungrateful. We have jobs and a nice place to live, and we're healthy. We're the people you see every day in the grocery stores. We obey the laws, we pay our taxes, we fly our flags on holidays, and we plod along trying to make it better for ourselves and our children and our parents. We aren't vocal anymore. I think maybe we're too tired. I believe that people like us are forgotten in America." Well, of course you believe you're forgotten, because you have been. This Republican administration treats us as if we were pieces of a puzzle that can't fit together. They've tried to put us into compartments and separate us from each other. Their political theory is divide and conquer. They've suggested time and time again that what is of interest to one group of Americans is not of interest to anyone else. We've been isolated. We've been lumped into that sad phraseology called special interests. They've told farmers that they were selfish, that they would drive up food prices if they asked the government to intervene on behalf of the family farm. And we watched farms go on the auction block while we bought food from foreign countries. Well, that's wrong. They told working mothers it's all their fault that families are falling apart because they had to go to work to keep their kids in jeans and tennis shoes in college, and they're wrong. They told American labor they were trying to ruin free enterprise by asking for 60 days notice of plant closings, and that's wrong. And they told the auto industry and the steel industry and the timber industry and the oil industry, companies being threatened by foreign products flooding this country, that you're protectionist if you think the government should enforce our trade laws, and that is wrong. When they belittle us for demanding clean air and clean water, for trying to save the oceans and the ozone layer, that's wrong. No wonder we feel isolated and confused. We want answers, and their answer is that something is wrong with you. Well, nothing's wrong with you. Nothing's wrong with you that you can't fix in November. We've been told that the interests of the South and the Southwest are not the same interests as the North and the Northeast. They pit one group against the other. They've divided this country. And in our isolation, we think government isn't going to help us. And we're alone in our feelings. We feel forgotten. Well, the fact is that we are not an isolated piece of their puzzle. We are one nation. We are the United States of America. Now, we Democrats believe that America is still the country of fair play, that we can come out of a small town or a poor neighborhood and have the same chance as anyone else, and it doesn't matter whether we are black or Hispanic or disabled or women. We believe that America is a country where small business owners must succeed because they are the bedrock, backbone of our economy. We believe that our kids deserve good daycare and public schools. We believe our kids deserve public schools where students can learn and teachers can teach. And we want to believe that our parents will have a good retirement, and that we will too. We Democrats believe that Social Security is a pact that cannot be broken. We want to believe that we can live out our lives without the terrible fear that an illness is going to bankrupt us and our children. We Democrats believe that America can overcome any problem, including the dreaded disease called AIDS. We believe that America is still a country where there is more to life than just a constant struggle for money. And we believe that America must have leaders who show us that our struggles amount to something and contribute to something larger, leaders who want us to be all that we can be. We want leaders like Jesse Jackson. Jesse Jackson is a leader and a teacher who can open our hearts and open our minds and stir our very souls. And he has taught us that we are as good as our capacity for caring about the drug problem, caring about crime, caring about education, and caring about each other. Now, in contrast, the greatest nation of the free world has had a leader for 8 straight years that has pretended that he cannot hear our questions over the noise of the helicopters. And we know he doesn't want to answer, but we have a lot of questions. And when we get our questions asked, or there is a leak or an investigation, the only answer we get is, I don't know, or I forgot. But you wouldn't accept that answer from your children. tell me you don't know or you forgot. We're not going to have the America that we want until we elect leaders who are going to tell the truth. Not most days, but every day. Leaders who don't forget what they don't want to remember. And for 8 straight years, George Bush hasn't displayed the slightest interest in anything we care about. And now that he's after a job that he can't get appointed to, he's like Columbus discovering America. He's found childcare. He's found education. Poor George. He can't help it. He was born with a silver foot in his mouth. Well, no wonder. No wonder we can't figure it out. Because the leadership of this nation is telling us one thing on TV and doing something entirely different. They tell us that they're fighting a war against terrorists. And then we find out that the White House is selling arms to the Ayatollah. They tell us that they're fighting a war on drugs. And then people come on TV and testify that the CIA and the DEA and the FBI knew they were flying drugs into America all along. And they're negotiating with a dictator who is shoveling cocaine into this country like crazy. I guess that's their Central American strategy. Now, they tell us that employment rates are great and that they're for equal opportunity. But we know it takes 2 paychecks to make ends meet today when it used to take 1. And the opportunity they're so proud of is low-wage, dead-end jobs. And there is no major city in America where you cannot see homeless men sitting in parking lots holding signs that say, "I will work for food." Now, my friends, we really are at a crucial point in American history. Under this administration, we have devoted our resources into making this country a military colossus. But we've let our economic lines of defense fall into disrepair. The debt of this nation is greater than it has ever been in our history. We fought a world war on less debt than the Republicans have built up in the last 8 years. You know, it's kind of like that brother-in-law who drives a flashy new car, but he's always borrowing money from you to make the payments. Well, but let's take what they're proudest of. That is their stand on defense. We Democrats are committed to a strong America, and quite frankly, when our leaders say to us, we need a new weapons system, our inclination is to say, well, they must be right. But when we pay billions for planes that won't fly, billions for tanks that won't fire, and billions for systems that won't work, that old dog won't hunt. And you don't have to be from Waco to know that when the Pentagon makes crooks rich and doesn't make America strong, that it's a bum deal. Now, I'm going to tell you, I'm really glad that our young people missed the Depression and missed the great big war. But I do regret that they missed the leaders that I knew. Leaders who told us when things were tough and that we'd have to sacrifice and that these difficulties might last for a while. They didn't tell us things were hard for us because we were different or isolated or special interests. They brought us together and they gave us a sense of national purpose. They gave us Social Security, and they told us they were setting up a system where we could pay our own money in, and when the time came for our retirement, we could take the money out. People in the rural areas were told that we deserved to have electric lights, and they were going to harness the energy that was necessary to give us electricity so my grandmama didn't have to carry that old coal oil lamp around. And they told us that they were going to guarantee when we put our money in the bank that the money was going to be there and it was going to be insured. They did not lie to us. And I think one of the saving graces of Democrats is that we are candid. We talk straight talk. We tell people what we think. And that tradition and those values live today in Michael Dukakis from Massachusetts. Michael Dukakis knows that this country is on the edge of a great new era. that we're not afraid of change, that we're for thoughtful, truthful, strong leadership. Behind his calm, there's an impatience to unify this country and to get on with the future. His instincts are deeply American. They're tough and they're generous. And personally, I have to tell you that I have never met a man who had a more remarkable sense about what is really important in life. And then there's my friend and my teacher for many years, Senator Lloyd Bentsen. And I couldn't be prouder, both as a Texan and as a Democrat, because Lloyd Bentsen understands America. From the barrio to the boardroom, he knows how to bring us together by regions, by economics, and by example. And he's already beaten George Bush once. So when it comes right down to it, this election is a contest between those who are satisfied with what they have and those who know we can do better. That's what this election is really all about. It's about the American dream, those who want to keep it for the few, and those who know it must be nurtured and passed along. I'm a grandmother now, and I have one nearly perfect granddaughter named Lily. And when I hold that grandbaby, I feel the continuity of life that unites us, that binds generation to generation, that ties us with each other. And sometimes I spread that Baptist pallet out on the floor, and Lily and I roll a ball back and forth. And I think of all the families like mine, like the one in Lorena, Texas, like the ones that nurture children all across America. And as I look at Lily, I know that it is within families that we learn both the need to respect individual human dignity and to work together for our common good within our families, within our nation. It is the same. And as I sit there, I wonder if she'll ever grasp the changes I've seen in my life, if she'll ever believe that there was a time when blacks could not drink from public water fountains, when Hispanic children were punished for speaking Spanish in the public schools, and women couldn't vote. I want so much to tell Lily how far we've come, you and I. And as the ball rolls back and forth, I want to tell her how very lucky she is. That for all of our difference, we are still the greatest nation on this good earth. And our strength lies in the men and women who go to work every day, who struggle to balance their family and their jobs, and who should never, ever be forgotten. I just hope that, like her grandparents and her great-grandparents before, that Lily goes on to raise her kids with the promise that echoes in homes all across America, that we can do better, and that's what this election is all about. Thank you very much.
Delegates and honored guests, it is now time to place the name in nomination for President of the United States, the name of Michael Dukakis. And for that purpose, I am now pleased to recognize the great governor of the state of Arkansas, the immediate past president of the National Governors Association, the Honorable Bill Clinton.
Mr. Chairman, I'm honored to be here tonight to nominate my friend Michael Dukakis for President of the United States. We, as Americans, have a lot riding on this election. We face big challenges, big problems, big opportunities. The fundamental fact of 1988 is that we can't take our prosperity for granted anymore in this competitive world economy. We've got to work harder and smarter to preserve the American dream. And that means we need new economic policies and new people policies. And that means we need new leadership to take us where we need to go. Michael Dukakis can provide that leadership. Tonight, I want to talk about where Governor Dukakis wants to take this country, what he wants us to do, and I'd like to talk a little about Mike Dukakis, the man. He's come so far, so fast, that all over this country of ours, people are asking questions. What kind of man is he? What kind of governor has he been? What kind of president will he be? He's been my friend for a long time, and I'd like to tell you my answers to those questions. I'd also like to tell you why I believe Michael Dukakis should be the first American president born of immigrant parents since Andrew Jackson. The other day, when I was back home in Arkansas, a friend of mine came up to me and said, "Bill, are you excited about Mike Dukakis becoming president?" And I said, "I sure am." And then he looked at me and smiled and he said, "Now, I know why you'd want him to be president, but how in the world can you get excited about a guy who mows his own lawn with a hand-powered mower and is so clean he squeaks when he walks?" And I thought about it, and I decided that's one reason I am excited about Mike Dukakis becoming president. You know, Mike's old-fashioned, all right. He's the kind of man who plays it straight and keeps his word and pays his bills. In my state, we say he's the kind of man you can tie to. Now, don't misunderstand me. In spite of all the enthusiasm for them and all the articles you've read about what a good fellow he is, Dukakis is not perfect. And I have to confess here in the Atlanta Omni, the home of the Atlanta Hawks, Mike Dukakis is absolutely obsessed about the Boston Celtics. During the recent playoffs, he even broke down his highly regarded discipline to watch the Celtics play on television when he should have been making campaign phone calls. But apart from that minor flaw, I want you to know that I think this man has the character, the record, and the vision America needs at this moment in our journey. He's the right man for this time. His character is steadfast and consistent. And one thing about Mike Dukakis is he wakes up in the same world every morning, which is a trait of considerable importance for a president. I found Mike willing to listen, an important lesson that we all have to learn, and one that Mike Dukakis and I learned the hard way. We got beat over the head with it. You see, we were both elected and then defeated and then given a rare second chance by our people. And I can tell you that does wonders for your sensitivity to others and their points of view. Mike and I met after our defeats. He was teaching at the Kennedy School, and I was the youngest ex-governor in American history. Go ahead. All right. Now, I want you all to calm down so I can tell the rest of the country why they should want Mike. The first time I met Mike Dukakis, we were both defeated politicians. He was teaching at the Kennedy School, and I was the youngest ex-governor in American history. I was struck even then by the lack of bitterness he felt over his defeat and by his continuing, deep, genuine commitment to public service, whether in or out of public life. As someone who's worked with Mike Dukakis on hard issues in the National Governors Association, as someone who's hammered out compromises with him, who's disagreed with him, who's fought battles by his side, I can tell you one thing. When he needs to be, Mike Dukakis is tough as nails. Of course, if he hadn't been tough, he could never have come back from that defeat. Most people who are defeated in politics just pull the curtains, yank the phone out of the wall, turn out the lights, and pack it in. But Mike Dukakis isn't that kind of person. He hangs in there. He's the Democratic Party's marathon man. One of Mike's political opponents in Massachusetts said of him, he has the strongest moral core of any man I ever met in public life. Mike Dukakis believes actions are more important than words. He has a passionate sense that performance matters too. And that's why his fellow governors, including the Republicans, 2 years ago said he was the most effective governor in the entire United States of America. Now, my fellow Democrats, after we nominate Mike Dukakis, when the Republicans take after him, and when they say all those things in the campaign season about his record, you remind them of how all the governors, including the Republicans, voted 2 years ago when there was no presidential politics involved, and they said what they really believed about Mike Dukakis, the governor. When Mike Dukakis speaks out for the American family, you can believe him. I have never known a person more devoted to his wife and to his children. He and Kitty are as different as daylight and dark, but they're so good together, and they'll be wonderful role models for our young people. And Kitty Dukakis will be a first lady this whole country will be proud of, and one who will gain respect worldwide. Thank you. Now, it's time to tell the people who aren't in this hall why they ought to want him too again. Mike Dukakis has a record that is as strong and solid as his character. I've known him for many years as a governor, but he's also been a soldier and a teacher and a lawyer and a legislator. He's excelled in all these roles because of his fine mind and his keen interest in the welfare of other people. And Michael Dukakis can speak to more of his countrymen in their native tongues than any person we have ever nominated for the presidency. He speaks in his native Greek, in Italian, and French, and as millions now know, in Spanish. As governor, Michael Dukakis hasn't just played with issues the way some politicians do. He's wrestled them to the ground. He's made the hard decisions. to balance budget, to create jobs, to fight crime and drug abuse, to increase daycare and health care, to do all those things that a leader has to do. Michael Dukakis knows how to translate ideas into action. One of our major news magazines called him the master of innovation. And more than any other governor, he has worked hard to bring good jobs to poor people and poor communities in his state. Long before Mike Dukakis thought he would be running for president, he said to me over and over again, I just don't understand why there is no national strategy, no national leadership to bring to the distressed areas of this country the kind of good opportunities my people in Massachusetts enjoy. It's wrong that nobody's trying to do it, and someone should try. And Michael Dukakis will try. Michael Dukakis believes that all citizens should lead productive lives. His famed welfare reform program, ET, has been a model for national welfare reform for one simple reason. It's taken so many people from the welfare rolls to the work rolls. Now, Governor Dukakis knows from his own experience, as does every other Democratic governor here tonight, that government cannot solve all problems alone. But unlike the present national administration, Mike Dukakis knows you can't leave the problems alone either. And that's why he's broken new ground in building partnerships with business, with labor, with educators, with local government, with anybody who would work with him to solve problems and seize opportunities. He's worked with welfare recipients like Ruby Sampson, a single mother who was dependent on welfare for 14 years. Mike helped her to get the education and training she needed to land a job as an operating room technician. Tonight, Ruby Sampson is not on welfare. She's earning more than $20,000 a year. He's worked with local officials like the mayor in Taunton, Massachusetts, to take the unemployment rate in his community from over 14 to under 4%. And he's worked with companies like Morse Tool and Diamond International to keep them open and healthy and to save jobs for hundreds of his constituents. Old Mike knows, as the Republicans always say, we may want the government off our back, but we sure do need it by our side. And Michael Dukakis knows that working together works. He's proved that again in this great convention because we're here in unity and poised for victory. Mike Dukakis is a man with a vision, a shining vision for this country. He wants a country with good jobs at good wages. He wants a country where everybody can send their kids to good schools and where they can offer them the opportunity to go to college. He wants a country where working parents have access to good child care for their children. He wants a country where people don't have to go to the poorhouse to get decent long-term care. He wants a country with a clean environment, and yes, he'd like to have a country with a clean government, which once again is devoted to the rule of law. Mike Dukakis wants a country that can compete and win in the world economy. He wants a country that can continue the quest for peace. Mike Dukakis, when he's president, will continue to work for arms control by sitting down across the table from Mr. Gorbachev. But as our commander-in-chief, he will see that American interests are strongly represented all across this globe. And any time, my fellow Democrats, because of his character, because of his record, and because of his vision, Governor Michael Dukakis would be a proud standard bearer for our party. But at this critical moment in our history, he is the man for all of America. The post-World War II era in which we dominated the world economically, politically, and militarily is over. For the rest of the lives of everybody in this great hall tonight, we'll have to compete with people in other countries for new jobs, for new businesses, for technological breakthroughs. And as the painful experience of the last decade has proved, we won't win if we're not prepared. The Republicans' main claim to the White House in 1988 is that in the face of this competition, they produced a 5-year recovery. Well, that recovery let a lot of middle class and poor people out. It was financed by a sea of borrowed money, and it ignored or aggravated some very, very harsh realities. The huge government and trade deficits, the rising class of poor people in this country, almost all of them young women and their little kids, an epidemic of social problems, the loss of our competitive position in low-wage, low-skill industries, in import-sensitive jobs, in energy and mining and agriculture, and even in some high-tech areas. Left unattended, these difficulties will compromise not only our children's future, but our own. In the first half of this decade, for the first time in my lifetime, only 4 in 10 of our people had an increase in their income. 20% stood still, and 40% of the American working people endured a reduction in their standard of living, and it's wrong. We used to believe, as President Kennedy told us, that a rising tide lifts all economic boats. Well, today's tide is drowning 4 in 10 of our fellow Americans who've fallen overboard, and the Republican crew of the ship won't even throw a lifeboat to the women and children. There are a lot of people who see these developments as proof positive that our country is in decline. You can go into the bookstores here in Atlanta and buy bestsellers confidently predicting that we're on the downhill slide because we either can't or we won't do anything to stop it. Michael Dukakis doesn't believe that for a minute. He thinks America's best days are ahead of it, and he knows we have faced and overcome greater challenges before. Michael Dukakis is an apostle of hope. Last night, when Jesse Jackson gave that awesome, wonderful speech, many of you waved signs with his slogan, "Keep hope alive." In his own way, Mike Dukakis will never let us forget Jesse's admonition. He knows we all have to be apostles of hope, and he knows there's a reason to hope. As the scripture reminds us, we must not grow weary in doing good, for in due season we will reap if we don't lose heart. Michael Dukakis won't lose heart. He is a builder who wants to build a bridge to tomorrow. A bridge strong enough to carry our heaviest load. A bridge wide enough for all of us in this great country to walk across together. A bridge long enough to take us into the 21st century. He's got a big job to do, and we have to help him. His economic challenge is to revitalize America, reducing our debt, making us more competitive, enlisting the help of other countries, working to relieve the awful burdens of our hundreds of millions of neighbors in Latin America whose futures are so closely bound to ours. This is an ambitious agenda, but Michael Dukakis has great ambitions for America. And even if he carries it off, we still have to be concerned because Economics alone will not take us where we need to go. Why? This is the most important case for the Dukakis election. Why? Because of all the advanced economies in the world, we here in America do the worst job of developing our most precious resource, our people. We let more babies die than others do. A child born in Costa Rica tonight has a better chance of living to be a year old than a child born in the nation's capital. We stand idly by while more of our children have children than others do, swelling the ranks of the truly disadvantaged. We accept far more adult illiteracy than others do, even though we know that 80% of the workforce in the year 2000 is already working, and we know that when workers can't read, eventually they'll have to pay for it, and we will too. We tolerate more homeless children than others do, degrading the most blameless among us. We live in the only advanced country in the world that's still in the dark ages when it comes to child care. That means we have lower productivity on the job and higher stress in the home. Our school dropout rates are twice those of our competitors. Those of our children who do finish school are 2 years behind their competitors in Japan and Europe in learning. All those kids that are going to be competing with ours for the good jobs Mike Dukakis wants them to have. And so many of our young people want to go to college, but they can't afford to go. You might ask, if you're looking at this on television, what has this got to do with me? If I've got a job or my business is in good shape or my kid's in college, why should I worry? I'll tell you why. Because the children that are in trouble tonight are the workers of tomorrow, and if they can't do the jobs of tomorrow, we're all going to suffer, and America will not be able to fulfill its dream and its destiny. I want, and you want Michael Dukakis to be president overwhelmingly for this reason. Mike Dukakis knows we don't have a single solitary person to waste. I want him to be president because he cares that 1 in 4 children under 5 are living below the poverty line, and that without preschool education and good health care, their futures will be cheated, and so will ours. I want him to be president because he understands today a middle-class family has to spend a lot more of its income to send a child to college than he and I had to spend when we went a generation ago, and he thinks government ought to help make up the difference. I want him to be president, and listen to this, because he knows one big reason there are so many families that are homeless is that since 1980, the Reagan administration has reduced new housing starts by 800%, and the children are on the street as a result of it. I want him to be president because he feels the pain of a mother who leaves for work every day worried sick because her child is not in a good child care center because of the government's feeble efforts to provide affordable daycare. And I want him to be president because he not only knows and cares about these problems, but because he'll do something about them. He's proved over and over and over again that he can make a difference in people's lives. Just as he did in Massachusetts, President Dukakis will insist that we all become partners in forging America's future, that we share the responsibility so we can share the glory. Mike Dukakis will have some interesting partners, business partners like Eugene Lang, a wealthy New York businessman who decided to keep hope alive in his old Harlem elementary school by offering all those poor children who'd stay in school a scholarship to college. Most of them took him up on his offer, and President Dukakis will spread and share his dream. Michael Dukakis will have teaching partners. Teaching partners like Jaime Escalante, the hero of the movie Stand and Deliver, who whose entire class of poor students in East Los Angeles stunned the education world by passing the Advanced Placement Calculus test, a tribute to a teacher who knows all children can learn and who believes that children will perform at the level of our expectations. When it comes to education, President Dukakis will stand and deliver. He'll have public service partners like Marion Edelman, the president of the Children's Defense Fund, who's waged a long bipartisan battle for early investment in our children, reminding us that we can invest in them now or pay for neglecting them later. Mike Dukakis knows we should invest in our children while they still have a future. He'll have political partners like Senator Lloyd Bentsen, who built a successful business and then went back into politics because Lloyd Bentsen wanted to preserve our free enterprise system and our national defense so that others could have the same success he's had. And he'll have political partners like Jesse Jackson, who long ago, before he ever was thinking of running for president, went with me into the schools in Little Rock in the late 70s to tell those children to say no to drugs and to open their brains and not their veins. Like Jesse Jackson, Mike Dukakis has worked for drug-free schools. And like Jesse Jackson, Mike Dukakis knows it's not enough just to say no to drugs. These kids have to be able to say yes to life. They have to be able to say yes to life. A few weeks ago, the police in Detroit, Michigan, broke a huge crack ring. And I'm sorry to say, the ring was being run by two people from my state. They came from the poorest part of Arkansas, and they had brought over 100 young men up there to help them peddle dope in the big cities. The news stories were very touching. You know what they said? We brought these kids up here from the country because they're more reliable than these street-smart city kids. They'll give us a good day's work for a good day's pay on the streets. I can't help wondering, when I think of that county they came from, 20% unemployment, 50% unemployment for black teenagers. If Michael Dukakis had had 8 long years to fulfill his commitment of good jobs for all of our people everywhere they live, I wonder if those kids had been willing to trade drugs for money. Maybe they would have said no to drugs and yes to life if Mike Dukakis had been president the last 8 years. My friends, we are moving into a future that will richly reward learning and achievement and innovation. And it will punish harshly ignorance and waste and the pursuit of short-term profit at the expense of long-term growth. We need a president who understands this, and Michael Dukakis does. This case for Michael Dukakis rests upon the acceptance of 2 simple ideas. The first is that we are all in this fight for the future together, that the future of the entrepreneur in Colorado and the investment banker in New York, whether they know it or not, is bound to the drought-ridden, debt-ridden farmers in North Dakota and the poorest black schoolchild in Mississippi. And the second simple idea is that we have always got to be willing to pay the price today for our children's tomorrow. I had a professor in college who told me that the sole reason for America's greatness was that our people have always believed the future could be better than the present, and that we've always done what it took to secure it. And he said, look, if we ever get to the point where our parents don't prefer their children's future to their present, we've had it, and don't you ever forget it. Michael Dukakis will never, never, never forget it. In closing, I want you to remember I want you to remember that when Michael Dukakis becomes president in November, the people of Massachusetts and this country will observe the 25th anniversary of John Kennedy's death. But his election will be a tribute to John Kennedy's life and legacy. When John Kennedy died, Abba Eban, the great Israeli statesman, said this one sentence: "Tragedy is the difference between what is and what might have been." Michael Dukakis has spent his whole life closing the gap between what is and what might have been. He'll stand and deliver for us. He'll build the bridge to tomorrow for us. And that's why I'm so proud to say he ought to be president and to place in nomination the name of the 41st President of the United States, Michael Dukakis from Massachusetts.
I take great personal pride in the presentation of our last seconding speaker. She hails from the state of Texas. She hails from the state of Texas, but she has reached a fellowship and sisterhood from Vermont to California. She personifies the fairness, integrity, and dignity that is so essential to governing. She's one of our party's greats, a pillar of strength to us all. Please give a very warm welcome to a wonderful woman, the Honorable Barbara Jordan.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That is quite a greeting. We are engaged in an important task at a very important time. We are positioning ourselves for the last decade of the 20th century. Our minds are turning away from hooray for Hollywood, and we are now confronting the hard reality of a nation which desires to become solvent again, competitive again, a nation which desires to have the trust of its allies and its compatriots. We want to retake the moral high ground. Now, to be what we want to be, to become the people we want to become, we have to be moved to action by what is reasonable, sensible, logical, and rational. Lloyd Bentsen is a sensible, logical, and rational choice for Vice President of the United States. You know, the people who founded America were very smart. Those founders warned us not to become overcome by factions, but to rely on reason as our guide. If we rely on reason as our guide, reason will temper and tenure our emotions. Reason will help us to do the right things. Reason will tutor us toward doing the right things. I say that Lloyd Bentsen is a rational and sensible and reasonable choice. Why? First of all, he's my senator. And I wasn't planning to come to this convention for any purpose, but when Lloyd Bentsen was tapped by Michael Dukakis as his choice for Vice President of the United States, I knew that if Lloyd Bentsen wanted me to come and second his nomination, I could not resist doing that, and I'm here to do it tonight. You know, Lloyd Bentsen has been in the United States Senate for almost 18 years. Lloyd Bentsen is a man who has an instinct for doing what is right. Lloyd Bentsen does not have to be pressured and lobbied to do the right thing. Now, Robert Bork. Lloyd Bentsen voted no on that nomination. And do you know what? Lloyd Bentsen didn't have to be pressured into voting no for Bork. He said, Lloyd Bentsen, Bork will put our civil rights and our civil liberties at risk, and we cannot afford to do that, and that's why I vote no. You heard Dan Rostenkowski tell you about Bentsen's service on the Finance Committee and now as chairman of the Finance Committee. Do you realize that the Finance Committee has jurisdiction over practically everything that affects our lives, the lives of each and every one of us? Lloyd Bentsen is patient, and he managed legislation, the trade legislation involving 24 committees of the House and the Senate, meeting over 8 months. Lloyd Bentsen was patient and moved it through. Now, the president vetoed it, but Lloyd Bentsen got the momentum for trade legislation going, and that momentum will not dissipate lightly. Lloyd Bentsen is concerned about health care for the elderly and the aged and the children and the widows. Lloyd Bentsen cares about the constituency of the Democratic Party, and he sees to it that whenever he gets a chance as a member of the United States Senate, he will vote for those programs that will aid and advance the health and well-being of those people who are our most vulnerable citizens. Lloyd Bentsen is a proponent of those programs to help those frail people. But I'll tell you something else about Lloyd. He has not been a spectator in the United States Senate. He has been a doer, an action man, and he sees to it that action takes place on behalf of those people who need it the most, and that's why he ought to be, he must be, the Democratic nominee for Vice President of the United States. And you know, Lloyd Bentsen knows that welfare programs don't work, that the people who need the money don't seem to be there to get it, but he is there working on welfare reform, as a part of his mandate for action on behalf of the people in the United States Senate. I wish you knew Lloyd Bentsen as I know Lloyd Bentsen. If you knew him as I do, you would join me on this podium tonight, and each of you would urge the nomination of this man for vice president. Lloyd Bentsen recognized that civil rights and human rights needed the attention of people in the United States Senate. He knew that civil rights and human rights needed the attention of the governors of America long before a Civil Rights Bill of 1964. He opened the doors of his public accommodations facilities to minorities long before there was a public accommodation section to the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And do you remember down south we used to have a poll tax? A poll tax to keep minority people from being able to vote. Lloyd Bentsen voted against the poll tax long before anybody thought about removing it from the government of the country. It is a mistake for you to label Lloyd Bentsen. The media and others have already tried to label him. They call him a Tory Democrat, a conservative, a businessman. They call him a man who is at odds with the liberal faction of the Democratic Party. But I would simply say to you tonight, don't try to label Lloyd Bentsen. Lloyd Bentsen is a good American, and he believes in the principles of the Democratic Party just like you do. Lloyd Bentsen believes in public service. He believes in the public service ethic, and he does not believe that you go into public service to get rich. You go into public service to serve people. I believe that Lloyd Bentsen will be a good vice president because he believes in this country and he wants to do what is right, and he has an instinct for doing what's right. Lloyd Bentsen believes with one of the ancient Greek philosophers, Aristotle. Aristotle said in the Politics, if liberty and equality, as it is thought by some, is chiefly found in democracies, they will be best attained when all persons alike share in the government to the utmost. Lloyd Bentsen believes that. Lloyd Bentsen would say with Adlai Stevenson, democracy cannot be saved by supermen, but only by the unswerving devotion and goodness of millions of little men. Lloyd Bentsen believes that. He is a sensible, reasonable, rational, common sense, good choice for Vice President of the United States. And I believe that he is the best choice you could come up with to give us a strong and winning ticket this November. I am pleased and I am proud to second the nomination of Lloyd Benson. Thank you very much.